Welcome again to the 307th Bombardment Group Association Korean War History blog. I'm your historian, Dr. James Blackwell. In this episode, we take a look at the historical record of the 307th from its initial deployment to Korea in August 1950 through the end of October 1950, when it looked like the war would be a quick one and the 307th would be headed home for Thanksgiving. As is always the case, the official records are incomplete, so our hope is that you will be able to fill in the blanks. It is also the case that the official history is the account of the official historians and may not be completely accurate. So we hope this blog will stimulate a response from you to complete and correct it where you can. The 307th was commanded by Texas native Colonel John Hilger, who had been deputy commander of the Doolittle Raid in World War II. When he graduated from Texas A&M University in 1932, he was commissioned in the U.S. Army Infantry. He received his wings in 1934 and was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for his role in the Doolittle Raid. His next assignment was commander of the Chinese-American Bomb Group in the China-India-Burma Theater of Operations. Beginning in the evening of July 31st, 31 B-29s and 31 complete crews took off in increments of 10 aircraft every 24 hours for the multiple-leg flight from MacDill Air Force Base, Florida, to Kadena Air Base in Japan on the island of Okinawa. Each aircraft carried additional essential personnel as passengers and additional cargo that would be needed on arrival. A steady stream of transports followed, bringing additional combat crews, flyaway maintenance parts and supplies, and support personnel. A total of nearly 150 B-29s were available for the Korean War, from 5 bombardment groups, including the 19th, the 22nd, the 92nd, the 98th, and the 307th. When the 307th arrived at Kadena, the war in Korea was not going well for the United States and its South Korean ally. The 8th Army was barely holding the Pusan Perimeter. Most B-29 sorties were in direct support of the desperate situation on the ground. But for the arriving 307th and 19th groups, the High Command had worked out an Interdiction Campaign plan designed to strike rail and highway bridges to disrupt the flow of weapons, ammunition, and troops to the south. The B-29s were to destroy marshalling yards and railway bridges from Pyongyang to Seoul in the west, and from Hamhung to Taepori in the east. The 307th flew its first combat mission on August 8th, and quickly got up to pace with a total of 20 combat missions in its first month of operations. Kadena was a busy and a crowded place. Before the war broke out, it was headquarters for the 20th Air Force, and was responsible for the air defense of Okinawa and the Marianas. It was also home to the 51st Fighter Interceptor Wing with F-80C interceptors and twin Mustang F-82s. SAC had its 31st Photo Reconnaissance Squadron Very Long Range there, with RB-29s, and the 19th Bombardment Wing headquarters was based there as well, although the 19th's B-29 group was farther away on Guam. But when the war broke out, that group was immediately moved northward to Kadena. The 19th had been committed to combat operations against targets of opportunity, assemblies of tanks, artillery, military columns, supply dumps, bridges, and all moving traffic between the 38th parallel and the front lines. The crowded conditions also meant that the 307th and the 19th would occupy tent cities for the duration of the war. The 307th unit history provides no rundown of the 20 missions it conducted in August of 1950, but we know from other sources of at least 3 specific missions. On the 8th of August, some of the 307th's B-29s hit Pyongyang's rail yards. On the 15th, a North Korean LA-15 attacked one of the 307th's B-29s, but was easily driven off by 2 bursts from the tail gunner. And on the 16th of August, the 307th participated in the saturation bombing of ground terrain along the Naktong River near Waegwan. That's all we have in the official records of the 307th in August of 1950. I'm confident that there are flight logs, memories, and personal accounts out there that we would welcome having in order to make this history more complete. September was a fast-paced month. Bomb load crews were preoccupied with work they had not anticipated would have to be done in theater. Strategic Air Command was not expected to drop fragmentation bombs. So as soon as the 307th arrived at Kadena, they were trained up by the 19th on how to manufacture their own A-4 bomb slings for hoisting frag bombs into the B-29 bomb bays. They also had to modify 1,300 B-7 bomb shackles. Drill presses and welding equipment expected to be available at Kadena were just not there. And to further harass the shops, their one service vehicle was deadlined in 3rd Echelon Automotive Shop for clutch repair and general reconditioning. And the only 110-volt AC power available was from portable generators, which also were in short supply and demanding their own maintenance requirements. The task overload on maintenance crews meant that combat crews had to do much of their own bomb loading. Here, rolling a 500-pounder toward their plane on a Far East Air Force base, are Staff Sergeant Clarence Cates, 30, a gunner of Westchester, Pennsylvania, and First Lieutenant Billy Fauché, a co-pilot from Bowling Green, Kentucky. Loading 500-pound bombs in the forward bomb bay of their Boeing B-29 Superfort at a Far East Air Force bomber base are, left to right, First Lieutenant Billy Fauché, 25, co-pilot from Bowling Green, Kentucky; First Lieutenant John Jackson, 29, bombardier from Highland Park, New Jersey; and Staff Sergeant James W. Bentley, 50, the plane's armorer from Billingsley, Alabama. Here, 3 Florida crew members put their home state's personal touch on a 1,000-pound general-purpose bomb bound for Korea. They are, left to right, First Lieutenant George Shutt, 27, a bombardier of Miami; First Lieutenant Kingdon A. Davidson, 28, pilot of St. Petersburg; and Staff Sergeant Horace A. Warren, 27, gunner of Dunalon. Lieutenant Fauché seems to have been a favorite subject for this photographer. Here he is again, this time checking the bomb bay in his B-29 for another strike at the North Koreans. Seen here are only 7 of the 40 500-pounders which go into a Superfort's bomb racks. For the first 3 weeks of September, the group was engaged in a max effort every 3rd day. There were 2 strategic targets singled out for early destruction by Far Eastern Air Forces. On September 5th, the 307th struck the Chosin nitrogen fertilizer and explosive factories. Intelligence had determined that the plants were so situated that land and water contrasts on the radar scopes would make them good radar targets, especially the Chosin nitro explosives factory. It was the 3rd time that this plant had been struck by U.S. B-29s. The previous strikes by the 22nd and 92nd Groups had destroyed 30% of the factory. This attack by the 307th finished it off. General Stratemeyer, Far Eastern Air Force's commander, announced that the biggest explosives and chemical center in Asia could no longer be considered a major factor in the Korean War. Then, on September 8, the 307th struck the Songjin chemical plant and marshalling yards. This major industrial center on North Korea's east coast housed North Korea's high-grade steel plants. After the war, a shipping clerk who had retained his records showed investigators that the steel refinery had sent more than 1,000 tons of tungsten and larger quantities of high-grade steel to China and Russia during 1949. And after February 1950, Russia had been getting most of the refinery's metals production. General O'Donnell sent his congratulations to the 307th in a personal message. From Commanding General, FEAF Bomber Command, Yokota, Japan, to Com Bomb Group 307, Okinawa, CG Personal, to Briggs and Hilger from O'Donnell. I have just seen the strike photos of the 307 Bomb Group's mission against the magnesite chemical industry at Songjin on 8 September 50. This was as fine a job of coordinated precision bombing as I have seen. The 3 squadron bomb pattern MPIs were so accurately spaced that the target area was completely saturated. Further CMA, the pattern indicated that the bombs were released from excellent, tight formations. The professional skill demonstrated on this mission is something any organization should be proud to have attained. Please pass my congratulations to all officers and airmen of the 307 Bomb Group who participated. But the September 8th mission was not without tragedy. At 06:08 hours that morning, aircraft 4072 of the 371st Squadron was taking off when it crashed into the East China Sea about 3 miles off the end of the runway. A fire started as a result of the accident. However, the bomb load did not explode. The 2nd Air Rescue Squadron immediately took up the search for survivors using both air and crash boat methods. 3 crew members were injured. First Lieutenant Billy Fauché, co-pilot, First Lieutenant Thomas Blaylock, radar observer, and Flight Engineer Master Sergeant William B. O'Mara. On the 13th of September, the body of First Lieutenant Hernandez, navigator, was recovered and identified. All other crew were declared dead on the 21st of September. Captain Nathan C. Haynes, Jr., pilot, First Lieutenant John J. Jackson, bombardier, Staff Sergeant Donald E. Brine, radio operator, Staff Sergeant Charles C. Wade, gunner, Staff Sergeant Otha P. Stanley, gunner, Staff Sergeant Leon C. Streef, gunner, Staff Sergeant Clarence S. Cates, gunner, and Master Sergeant Jack E. Kennedy. MacArthur's Incheon landing on September 15th, combined with the 8th Army's breakout from the Pusan Perimeter, sent the North Koreans fleeing back to the north. All or part of 8 North Korean Army divisions were cut off, and most of the other divisions had to abandon the greater part of their tanks, heavy weapons, and supplies as they attempted to escape. The strategic targets in North Korea, having for all practical purposes been eliminated, B-29s now daily roam the length and width of North Korea, acting as bridge busters and rail cutters to further hamper enemy supply and communications. No mission was complete when the aircraft landed safely and parked at its place on the ramp. First, the crew had to report to the intelligence section for an interrogation of what they had encountered during the flight. The coffee and cigarettes are dragged out when interrogation starts. Here, the interrogation officer puts a question to Lieutenant Robert P. Hinkle of Lima, Ohio, bombardier, while Lieutenant James P. Carnahan of Tampa, Florida, co-pilot, and Staff Sergeant Alfred T. Callahan of Morganton, North Carolina, right gunner, exchange a few words. Filling in some blank spaces and signing the name completes the mission. In a matter of minutes, Captain Cyril H. Robbers of Tampa, Florida, radar officer, Lieutenant Richard D. Santoriello of Tampa, Florida, navigator, Lieutenant Richard V. Banaszak of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, bombardier, and Lieutenant Vincent A. Lamberti of Brooklyn, New York, pilot, will be headed to bed for rest for the next mission. The enemy had not much to show against the 307th for September. There was no fighter opposition on any mission. One aircraft from the 372nd suffered major flak damage on the 16th of September, and 3 others only minor effects. The 307th continued to live in Tent City No. 2, but enjoyed some improvements. The addition of sidewalks and the installation of heaters at the showers made living a little more pleasant. Several members of the group aided materially in the construction of a chapel tent. Catholic and Protestant services were now being held in the chapel tent rather than in the group briefing tent. The 307th flew 13 missions in October. Note the typo on this page of the unit history. This was the mission rundown for October, not November. For the first week of the month, they were tasked to provide 8 aircraft per day on interdiction missions, striking railroads and bridges. On the 7th and again on the 10th, the tasking was 24 aircraft. The railroads around Pyongyang were hit so many times that bombardiers had difficulty finding undamaged strips of track to line up on. Several aircraft went out on surveillance missions with instructions to hit anything that moved or looked like it might move. The 307th and the 19th were now leaning forward in the saddle for the anticipated return to the United States. Group and squadron supply officers departed on the 9th of October to process shortages and begin to procure replacement equipment and supplies. After the mission on October 24th, the group received stand-down orders. The two other CONUS-based B-29 groups had already departed the theater for their home bases in the U.S. Before it departed, the 22nd Group transferred one of its B-29s to the 371st Squadron to replace the B-29 lost on the 8th of September. The 371st Supply Officer, First Lieutenant Frank S. Johnston, was appointed aircraft commander and formed a new crew for this ship, with Tech Sergeant William B. Cowart appointed crew chief. The third week of October found all United Nations forces rapidly closing in on the Manchurian border, as one of the most dramatic military campaigns in history appeared to be entering into its final phase. The last mission of October was flown on the 24th, with an 8-aircraft effort against the marshalling yards at Kilchu and Songjin. Aircraft availability remained high, at over 86%. Colonel Hilger put the 307th on a regular flying training schedule, with each squadron putting a minimum of 2 aircraft per day in the air. This would allow the crews to meet their annual flying training requirements, such as instrument checks, radar bombing, transition, and calibration missions. Many of these tasks were nearly impossible to maintain during combat flying. At this point, rumors circulated as to the group's date of departure for home station, although the wing commander cooled that enthusiasm when he estimated that the group would probably have Thanksgiving dinner here at Kadena. But crews and maintenance men took advantage of the time to wash as many aircraft as they could. Corrosion is one of the greatest problems for aircraft on Okinawa. Maintenance sections installed bomb bay fuel tanks in anticipation of receiving orders to return. Suddenly, tens of thousands of communist Chinese troops that had infiltrated across the Yalu River in force attacked on October 25th. Once again, U.S. and Allied forces conducted a hasty withdrawal to the south. The bomb bay tanks came out, bombs were loaded, and combat crews were briefed for a mission on November 1st, 1950.